Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I now have the privilege of introducing two men who've made a commitment, both of their personal resources, but of their own considerable energies and time and heart to education and to ethical leadership and to the relationship between the two. So I'm going to introduce both of them, and I hope you will applaud them both when they come up on stage. One is Patrick Awuah. Patrick started Ashesi University, a liberal arts college in his native Ghana. He had come here to go to Swarthmore College and then went to work at Microsoft as a program manager for Microsoft, and we will hear the tale of his return to Ghana for the purpose of founding Ashesi. He'll be then joined by Syed Babar Ali, who from Pakistan. He founded the Lahore University of Management Services, LUMS, as well as the Ali Institute of Education, which is there to educate teachers of elementary and secondary school children. He established Pakistan's largest paper and board mill, Packages Limited, and so if we have a chance, we might ask him a little bit about how he has made the social good part of the value chain of his company, one of his many companies. Please join me in welcoming them both.
You can sit in the middle.
So
In the middle.
we're going to start with Mr. Ali.
I'm following orders.
So thank you so much. You started LUMS. And tell me something, until the day it started, you might tell us what year it began, but by and large, were the best students going overseas for their education until starting LUMS, those seeking a management education?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what sort of prompted me to embark on this journey really was to try and train young managers who would serve companies, primarily Pakistani companies, who didn't have the opportunity to either have a training program of their own or to hire people who were trained abroad. There was only one management institute in Karachi, and that was not enough for the country. So we thought that we should have a business school, and so then I went around and sought help from people who who recognized the need for having trained managers, educated managers. So we went around and I first sort of, when we were collecting money, I wrote the first check myself so that others would follow. And I had excellent response because, I'd been working for about 25 years in business, so there was a certain kind of impression that people had of the way I had worked. So that was a very encouraging thing, and we set up the business school, and that's 25 years ago. And then it's now grown into a full-fledged university with 2,600 students, of whom about 1,800 are undergraduates. So
in general, we often hear about the problem of brain drain, of folks leaving South Asia to study abroad in the UK or elsewhere, and then, of course, the rest of us benefit because they stay where they went to study, and that's a risk. Is that a large problem in Pakistan?
Well, I mean, still, there is a problem because there's the grass is greener, outside. The better opportunities. But I'd give you an idea that we have so far in the last 25 years graduated about 4,000 graduates, both in the undergraduate program and in the master's program, of whom 1,000 are working abroad, 400 in North America, 200 in Europe, and 200 in the Middle East, and 200 in the Far East. but 3,000 are staying at home. And of these who are abroad, they keep on coming back. I mean, on annual vacation, some have gone into business for themselves abroad. They send money back home, and they are able to support their families, give them a quality of life they wouldn't have had if they hadn't been abroad. So I think overall, I don't sort of at all criticize people who go abroad and work and benefit the homeland and their families.
And those who get to study abroad are part of a small elite in any event, I would think. So to what degree is LUMS able to reach out to a more economically diverse student body?
Yeah, of course. LUMS has given an opportunity to people to have a quality education who otherwise would not have had either within the country or gone abroad. We have catered to a very large group of that sector. And over the last 10 years, we started a determined program to reach out to the individuals who came from the lowest strata of society but had the ability or the potential to get into LUMS. And what we've done is we have sought out the help of the 27 boards that regulate the matriculation examination throughout the country, and through them have reached out to the schools that produce good results in the annual matriculation examination. And there we've gone to the schools and have asked them to identify students who would be taking the matriculation examination in 2 years' time, the brightest students. So there's a larger pool of about 7,000 students that we work with. And over the 2 years, then we boil them down to ultimately to 500. Half of them we bring to our campus in Lahore and the other half to another campus in Karachi, where we have an intensive coaching program with them. And we test them out. And then they finally take our entrance examination. And last year, out of this larger pool of 7,000, 170 made it to our entrance program. And there was it's blind admission, so we have no way of finding out whether this person came through this pool or the regular pool that came out of better schools. And today, out of a total student body of about 2,600, we have 270 people from the less privileged class. They are really the bottom of the pyramid. And to us, this is a very rewarding thing.
So it's more than 10%
yes.
of the student body.
Yeah.
So to what extent is higher education a vehicle both for kind of building the management class that'll be very much a part of economic development, but also a vehicle for broadening participation in the economy? So it's not just those who started with advantages.
These are not just business school graduates. These are graduates from the undergraduate program, from our other schools like computer science, economics, law. And a couple of years ago, I was in Boston, and my granddaughter, she was working for Acumen in New York. She called me up and she said, "Grandpa, there's a boy at Cornell who wants to see you." So 2 days later, this young man turned up, and I didn't know whether he wanted money or what. And he said, "I'm the first person from the National Outreach Program who is at Cornell." So coming from that background, and the next day I was addressing some students at the Harvard Business School, and another young man walked up to me, and he said he was the second National Outreach Program student studying at the Kennedy School. So we have a number, these are very brilliant students, and they come from poor families. If you give them an opportunity, they can go right to the top.
Now, you went on to not only, you also serve on the boards of many liberal arts colleges as well, but you also went on to found a school for training teachers of elementary and secondary school kids. Tell us something about what led to that decision, that choice.
Well, I tell you, I was very worried in the early years of the business school at LUMS when we started that we were not getting quality students. And I was thinking of starting a college as a nursery to feed the graduate school. So I called a meeting of educationists in Lahore from these various colleges that I'm associated with, Connect College, Edson College, Government College. And I said, should we have a 4-year program or a 3-year undergraduate program? Previously, we only had a 2-year program after high school for a BA degree in Pakistan. And one of my friends who was sitting there said, why do you want to do this? And I said, to improve quality of education. You have to start at the primary level. So it totally changed my whole idea of starting in nursery, a college to feed LUMs. And I said, no, I'll concentrate and I'll set up a school for training of teachers for primary and secondary schools. So LUMs were forgotten, but I then concentrated on setting up the school. And 99% of the teachers the graduates were sort of recruited for the teachers training program. It's a 1-year program. They are women, and they come from all walks of society and primarily from the lower middle class. And so they now have an opportunity to not only to contribute to the education of young kids, but also to improve the quality of life of their own families.
Yeah. Say something about the dropout rate for Pakistani children as they finish primary school and head towards secondary school, and also about maybe the differences between boys and girls in those numbers.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, if you look at the general statistics at the primary school level, not every child goes to the primary school. Maybe about 60% of the children, school-going kids, kids go to the primary school, of whom less than 50% go beyond the primary stage. And the reason is, I think it's economics. People can't afford it. They want to put their kids to work. But also lack of opportunity, and there aren't enough secondary schools that these kids could be admitted to. I'm running a program for primary and secondary schools at a village that belongs to our family, and there in order to attract students, kids to school, we provide free lunch to everybody, including the teachers, and free uniform. And we find that the rate of almost 80% of the kids that should have been in the school are at the school. Mm-hmm. And there is no dropout. They go right from the primary school to the secondary school. But it's a question of economics and incentive.
And there are tuitions in most of these schools, are there not?
Yeah, well, in our school it's all free. I mean, the one that we are running in our village. But at government schools, it's a nominal. I mean, primary school fee is free, but in order to get the attention of the teachers, I think they have to pay them some kind of a head fee to the teacher to make sure that he gives attention to their kids. But it's very nominal.
Mm-hmm. And what about the issue of access of rural kids versus kids in an urban setting? Are there issues of access, just physical access?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the opportunities are equally bleak for both urban and rural kids, because we have large slums in larger cities, and there the schooling again is difficult. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that the kids coming from the slum area have any better opportunity of better education than in villages.
I think about kids, girls faced with issues related to transportation. Are there?
Well, yeah. Well, in villages, of course, there is a school in the village, so the girl doesn't have to walk too far. In cities, transportation is an issue. There is public transport, but and parents don't like their girls to go too far away from their homes. So if there is a school within walking distance, that is availed of. Mm-hmm. But it's an issue which needs to be addressed.
And how about the teacher pay? How well are they compensated?
Teachers' pays have recently been improved, and I would say they are on par with, which is not enough, with the minimum wage in the country. And in any case, teachers at the primary level are mostly women. And so any income coming to them through pay still adds to the family's income.
Yeah. Yeah. The national investment is only 2.3%. National investment in education is only 2.3% of the GDP. Is there problems of political will there? What stands in the way?
2.3 has come up from a still lower figure in the past. There is a lot of emphasis and talk and need, and of course, the country's statesmen and politicians, education unfortunately has been on the back burner, but we are agitating for it all the time.
Educating them, the politicians.
Trying to educate them, and also there is a fair amount of private sector effort to make up for the lack of initiative by the government. The private sector is coming forward. And would you believe it, in my province of the Punjab, which is almost half the population of the country, almost 45% of the kids in schools go to private schools. So there is a lot of private effort in making up for the deficiency of the government.
So in a way, this can actually be, this is a form of organized philanthropy that is taking place in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Is that the most developed aspect of organized philanthropy in Pakistan? Is it in the educational sector?
Yeah, I would say education and health. People are running clinics, they're running hospitals, but education is one of the primary ones. And I know of many people who have gone into retirement, and taken this on as a challenge to set up schools, run the schools. I know a general who's a headmaster in a school. And so there is a lot of initiative.
There's a future for generals. This is good to know. Mr. Ali's philanthropy is broader than this. I mean, it does focus primarily, though, on both education and health. And we had a conversation earlier about the question of what to do about members of the Global Philanthropy Forum who have an interest in Pakistan but don't know how to navigate Pakistani society, don't really know which organizations or what, that he has very generously offered to be of help to those of you who have Pakistan in your sights as an area of real interest. I did want to ask you about if these schools, these public schools, have tuitions. Madrasas are free, are they not? And why would you choose a public school over a madrasa if you were a parent?
Well, madrasas, have, of late they have earned a bad reputation, but in our history, madrasas were going back hundreds of years, these were the centers of learning. And but of late, in the last 20 years, there's a lot of money that has come from abroad for setting up new madrasas, and this money is primarily come from Saudi Arabia. And so this money is really directed towards religious education of a particular type, and people, primarily for boys, it's an outlet to get them some kind of education. They get free food, they get free clothing. So they have now become sort of hornets' nests for breeding of these future terrorists. And there is a certain amount of effort being made to convert these madrasas into normal schools and to change their curricula and to influence their objectives, so that these young men who come out of these madrasas become normal citizens rather than be people who would disrupt society.
And speaking from money from overseas, U.S. development assistance to Pakistan has been traditionally what's called security assistance, military assistance. But now there's this new bill, this new act, the Kerry-Lugar bill, that provides $200 million of funds for civilian pursuits. To what extent is education an aspect of that, and is this a good thing?
There's a fair amount of talk about it. They are going around and making assessment. They, in fact, came to our Teachers Training Institute, the USAID people, to work out a program where some of the teachers of madrasas could be brought there for reorientation. So there is an effort being made, but I think they still have to formulate their firm policy. They are groping.
And then finally, I just want to ask before turning to Patrick, to raise two points. One is that school is not mandatory, if I understand it, in Pakistan. What are the laws in relationship to?
Primary education is mandatory, but it requires an organization really to ensure that every child goes to school, and that organization is missing.
Yeah, yeah.
On paper, I mean, primary education is compulsory and free.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, unlike, I would say that Ghana is unlike Pakistan in the sense that school is required all the way through high school, is it not?
That's correct.
That's right.
All the way through middle school.
Mm-hmm. And Ashesi, the name of the college you founded, means new beginning.
That's right.
So say something about what inspired this for you.
Well,
was it a new beginning for you as well as for
Yes, actually,
Ghana?
it was a new beginning for me. I had quit Microsoft to go do education in Ghana, and I would wake up every once in a while and wonder, what am I doing? I mean, this is a risky thing I've done. But then I read the words of Goethe, and it said, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So I typed it up and put it on my mirror so that I saw it every day. And the day I realized I was committed to this project, I said to myself, wow, I am committed. This is the beginning. And so that's where the idea came from, to call it the beginning. But we also felt that it was a good name because we hoped that this university would serve as a new beginning for students that came there. It'd serve as a new beginning for higher education in Africa. And also we wanted the name to remind the future managers and the future students of this institution that they should see every day and every year as the beginning of the next thing, and never rest on their laurels.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had come from Ghana to go to Swarthmore. You went to Swarthmore and went on to, you went straight on to Microsoft.
Yes.
You were doing wonderfully there. What made you go back home and make a commitment to your home country?
I had come through a personal journey when I started Microsoft. The first year after I started Microsoft, I went to visit Ghana for the first time in 5 years. And that was a very difficult visit. I was there for 2 weeks, and up until that time, I had always thought I would go back to Ghana. But I came back from that trip and was so disillusioned, I announced to all my friends that I'd never go back to Ghana to live, that I would never, my career was going to be in the United States. Well, fast forward 5 years from that time, my son was born, and that event caused me to reevaluate what I was about. In particular, I realized that Africa would be important for my children and for their children. And at the time my son was born, there were awful things happening in Africa. Somalia had disintegrated, Rwanda had this genocidal war. And so it was a period that was very wrenching for me personally. But I decided that Africa needed to turn around, and I also decided that people like me needed to be part of the solution. And frankly, I realized that I had been somewhat irresponsible, arrogant to think I could disown a continent, because it's not in my power to do that. And that's how I decided to go back and get engaged.
It's interesting that you chose a liberal arts college. You didn't go for sort of vocational education, and say something about the nature of the world that the next generation is inheriting, that the kind of the skills of being able to synthesize and analyze and adapt, sort of learn something in one setting and adapt that knowledge to a completely different setting, the degree to which those are the analytical skills that you need in order to succeed in today's world.
Right. Well, you know, I experienced a completely different kind of education in the US than what's practiced in Ghana, which is basically memorizing information and repeating back. And if you look at the state of Africa today, it is very clear to me that most of the work that needs to be done in Africa is yet to be done. And so, and for that work to happen, we need a leadership core that is able to take problems and break them apart and be very intentional and analytical about coming up with solutions, and able to take risks, to take guarded risks. We also need, and so that's where, you know, critical thinking and analytical thinking and synthesis and all of that, creativity is important. But also we need a leadership core that is empathetic, that is compassionate, that actually cares about the well-being of society at large, and that is ethical in the way it thinks, and that's ethical in the way that it behaves. So this is what caused me to look at the liberal arts model. I mean, I'd experienced it myself in the United States, but look at the liberal arts model and see that, you know, an education that teaches people to think broadly and to think critically, and that teaches people to think deeply about ethics and ethical issues, is really something that's necessary in Ghana. And up until Ashesi started, it didn't exist in Ghana.
And you actually, do you find the same thing in Pakistan, that ethical leadership is an important part of the learning?
I mean, people have been talking ethics all their lives, you know. It's talked in the religious books and everything else, but when it comes to practice, you know, there's big difference of what you read and what you practice, what you do. And one of the things that we emphasize on our students, and I address every graduating class, and I put a lot of emphasis on ethics. I tell them this is something which is 100% in their control, and once they deviate from it, it's lost forever. Mm-hmm. So this is something that we keep on stressing on them.
And do you figure, Patrick, that in essence, for better or for ill, it's those who've had access to college education that will end up in leadership positions?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you, when I decided to leave Microsoft, or before I decided to leave, I went back to Ghana and I had lots of conversations with people. And I did this exercise where I would take problems, you know, take any problem and ask the question, why is this the way it is? And you'd get a set of answers, and you take each of those answers and ask why and try to drill down. And very quickly, we would settle on leadership as the root source of the problem. And leadership, not in the sense of just political leadership, but the entire civil service, the engineers, the judges, the lawyers, the police officers, the teachers. So all the people who are running key institutions in the country, how they were behaving. And the way they were behaving was pretty much accepting the status quo, and some of them actually dishonest, you know, unethical, corrupt. So that's what caused me to say, okay, so there's this leadership core that's behaving a certain way. Why is that? Where is this coming from? And that took me to look at education. And I looked at primary education, secondary education, and college education. In Ghana, about 80% of primary school aged kids go to school. About 30% of high school kids go to high school. And about 5% of college age kids go to college. And that is the polytechnics, the teacher training colleges, the universities. 5%. And the thing about 5% is that it is too small, but more importantly than that, the 5%, the education they get is a direct predictor of what Ghana will look like 15 to 30 years from now. Why? Because that 5% are the people who will be running key institutions. The 95% are not going to be the judges and the lawyers. They're not going to be the teachers. It's the 5%. So I went to look at what was happening in the universities, and I got scared. I mean, the big public universities, which were the only ones that existed at the time, you would walk onto a university campus and you would see classes, 1,500 kids in one room, students standing outside in the verandas, by the windows, trying to see a lecture from outside because they're just so crowded. You would see students who were studying chemistry who never did a chemistry lab, or students who were studying computer science who only wrote code on paper. And you're getting all these stories about corruption in school, right, and cheating on exams and this sort of thing. And for me, looking at that picture, that was just frightening, because that is what Ghana is going to look like in 30 years. When a kid goes to a school where the sanitation is poor, where when they're running a hospital, the sanitation is going to be poor in that hospital as well. When a kid goes to a school where they're all about memorizing information and regurgitating and not anything about problem solving or creativity, they're going to behave a certain way. And I'll give you an example. Actually, just 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a deputy minister in government. I didn't know what it was about, and he wanted to meet me, so I went to meet him at his office. And so he says, I want to talk with you about what you're doing at Ashesi, because I hear from people in corporate Ghana that your students tend to have ideas, they tend to be creative, they tend to deal with ambiguity and so on. And I have a real problem in this ministry because we don't do anything new ever. And the way this ministry works is my entire staff does things, and I ask them, why are we doing it this way? And the answer is, well, that's how we've always done it. And we do things a certain way. We don't change. I ask them to go and come up with ideas, and they can't. And the only thing that causes change here in this ministry is a crisis. If there's an emergency, then something will change. And the way it'll change is we will call for a consultant from outside of Ghana to come and help us figure it out. And this is a problem. Now, this minister had decided that perhaps what's causing this is the way his staff had been educated in the first place, and wanted to learn more about what Ashesi is doing and why our graduates seem to be different. And Gita mentioned a similar story last night. Really, we have to really pay attention to how people are educated, because if you teach people to just memorize information, you're teaching them to always look backwards. They're unable to solve problems, and it's very debilitating for a country. So this is what we're trying to change at Ashesi.
To say something about, Mr. Ali made the differentiated between theory and practice when it comes to ethics. As part of the education at Ashesi, are students asked to put the ideas that they develop to practice? Is there a community service component? Is there an action component to their education, an application?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We believe in experiential learning, right? So students are doing projects for corporate Ghana as part of their coursework. We have a community service requirement for graduation. I'll tell you, when we started that program, it was just a requirement for graduation, but it was distinctly extracurricular. And after our first year, we decided to make it part of the curriculum and give grades, because we said, look, we need to put our grades where our mouths are. And the thing about community service is you want to take these students and demonstrate to them that what they're learning in school can be applied to social problems, right? So we described it as this is the laboratory for the humanities and the social sciences. So that's one part. And there's a confidence that builds from all this experiential learning. But more than that, we wanted to teach them compassion. And when, you know, a 20-year-old gets to go work in an orphanage and sees what a difference he or she can make in the life of some kid who's lost his or her parents, that builds compassion. And we think that's very important. And it's the same thing with ethics, right? So we practice ethics. The way we run the school, we're transparent, we're ethical about the way we do things. We demand ethical behavior of our students. We sanction those who behave unethically, and we're very unabashed about it. But I'll tell you, there's something that we recently done in terms of experiential learning, which has caused an interesting ripple in Ghana, which is that we got our students to engage this question intellectually, and to encourage them to develop an honor system. So we have an honor system now running in the school, and students take exams unproctored. It's unheard of in Ghana that you can have a class of students without adult supervision who will take an exam and not cheat, and who commit to holding their peers responsible if those few who will violate the honor code. And this has been running for 2 years now. And the interesting wrinkle to this is that the accreditation board recently asked us to stop it because they don't believe that students are actually being honest. And it's, you know, student government unanimously voted that we should defy the directive from the accreditation board. The faculty and administration voted unanimously that we should defy the directive. And I said to them, you know, I agree, but let's talk with the whole campus. So we had a meeting, you know, 400 chairs, standing room only, as for 450 students. We think they were all there. And we have this discussion, and students are so passionate about maintaining the honor system. And I said to them, I agree, but we need a show of hands. So the president of Student Council says, we need a show of hands, but remember that history is on the side of those who fight hard for a good cause. So every hand goes up, and then there's a standing ovation. And I go home that evening. It's just an amazing moment. And I go home that evening and I think, you know, there's no way that a phenomenon like this should be allowed to die. And so we told the accreditation board that we disagree with them. We began a conversation in the media, and so now this is on radio and television, and it's become a national discussion about ethics and how you teach ethics and how students should behave and so on. And I think that it's ultimately been a good thing for Ashesi, and ultimately will be a good thing for Ghana. There's now, a group of CEOs in Ghana who are drafting an open letter to send to the educational authorities in support of what we're doing. And this is going to cause, if we're successful, I think it's going to cause a sea change in our concept of what education is and what's possible in terms of student behavior and campus cultures.
You referred to the head of student government. You referred to the head of student government. Is that a he or a she?
It's a he. We, in 2006, had a woman elected as student government president. It was the first time in Ghana's history, and she won with 75% of the vote. This year, there were 3 tickets for student government as president and vice president. And all 3 tickets had women on them. So the one that won was a man who's president and vice president's a woman. There was a ticket that was 2 women. And, it's really good because, it's women standing up for leadership positions and their peers voting for them. And giving, equal weight to their words, right? It's very important. It gives me a lot of hope.
Mr. Ali has been very, very focused on the whole issue of gender disparities and also economic disparities and the role of education for helping to correct both. Are these similarly difficult issues in Ghana, and does education have a similar role in that regard? And especially, to what degree is there economic diversity there?
Well, Ghana is making progress. I mean, there are difficulties, and I think that if you look at the public universities, they tend to be between 30 to 40% women enrolled. The private universities are closer to parity, 50% men and women. The Chief Justice in the Supreme Court is a woman. The Speaker of Parliament is a woman. The Attorney General is a woman. Ghana is definitely making progress, but there's work to be done. If you look in corporate, and even in Parliament, even though the Speaker is a woman, there's many more men than women in Parliament. But there is good, consistent progress in Ghana. A male in Ghana typically has 10 years of education. A female typically has 9 years of education. So the gap is closing. And that is true as you look at younger generations. If you look at my mother's generation, it's a completely different story. Very clearly, men had the upper hand there.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask both of you where you're seeing your graduates go. You were referring to corporate CEOs being interested in this whole issue.
Right.
Are your graduates going into government positions, in private sector positions? Where are they ending up?
Most of our graduates are going into corporate and the not-for-profit sector.
Not-for-profit sector?
Yeah, the NGO sector. We don't have many graduates going into the public sector except for someone in the military. Unfortunately, there's a reason for that. When students go into internships, we get feedback from them. And what we discovered was that students who went to work in the civil service came back with reports such as, if they were productive, their supervisors got upset because they were making everybody else look bad. And, there's a saying, little drops of water make a mighty ocean. Someone told me, the other thing is little drops of water evaporate. And that's true of the near heat source, right? So we had to grapple with the question of, well, do we really work at placing students in an environment where, they're going to be undermined or not? And we decided that, our public sector impact probably will best be made when our graduates have grown professionally in the NGO sector or the corporate sector, and then eventually enter into the public service at a higher level than starting at a junior level. But most of, we have 100% placement, and 95% of those placements are in Ghana or West Africa, and 5% are students who are going on for graduate education, typically in Europe.
And what is the unemployment level in Ghana?
So the unemployment level in Ghana is 20%. The underemployment level is much higher. Yeah. But a lot of college grads, I would say probably more than 50% of college grads find it very difficult to find jobs. But part of the reason is because of the way they've been educated, right? As one chief executive explained to me, when they hire a college-educated person, they're hiring a mind. They're not hiring a pair of hands, right? And so if somebody has had an education that does not empower that person to make decisions and to solve problems, then that person is not as useful to you, because often they don't have time to always answer the questions, what should I do? What should I do next? What should I do next? And so part of the problem is, the economy, but part of it really is the education that the kids are getting in the first place.
And in Pakistan, Mr. Ali, where are your students going, and what is the unemployment rate? And then thirdly, how robust is civil society? I was really interested that Ashesi students are going into nonprofits. I don't know how much that's the case.
Yeah, with us, well, the general unemployment would match Ghana's, but our students get 100%, they're 100% placed when they, even before graduation, they get job offers. Most of them go into the private sector, and some are going into business for themselves, which is very rewarding. But the NGO sector is still very weak in Pakistan.
And for those who go into business for themselves, how available is capital for them?
Well, I mean, the people who go into the business for themselves, coming straight out of our university, joint family businesses. But there is a certain percentage. We carried out a study that almost 5% of our graduates who joined private sector ultimately ended up starting their own businesses. And they are now employing new graduates coming out of LUMS. So that is a new breed of entrepreneurs, which to me is very exciting, very rewarding.
Very satisfying.
Right, and we have a similar phenomenon with respect to students starting their own businesses. And funding tends to be friends and family initially.
Yeah. I heard you once say, I've had the opportunity to hear you speak before, lucky me, and I heard you once say that students had more of a sense of entitlement, I think was your phrase, than
Right.
of responsibility. Was that something that you were particularly trying to turn around when you?
Right, that's one of the things when I was thinking about what to do after Microsoft and getting into education, is that I got this sense that a lot of university students and graduates felt that they were entitled, but they had very little sense of the responsibility that they had as well, right? This is something that we wanted to change, and it's one of the reasons why we started this community service requirement at Ashesi. And we have a leadership seminar series. It runs through 4 years, and it's modeled on a program at Aspen Institute. That seminar ends in the 4th year in a seminar titled Leadership as Service. And that's where, you know, they go and do their community service and write about it. And, you know, certain inspiring things emerged from that. Several years ago, the valedictorian of the class was a computer science major, could get any job she wanted, decided to go work in an orphanage instead. And so she became the chief operating officer of this orphanage. And you know, she's teaching these kids how to use computers and to do some basic programming. And for a couple of years, her boss left to go do his MBA, and she was running this place. With incredible results. I mean, for 3 years running, these kids graduated within the top 5% nationally on the national exam. Now, would she have worked in that orphanage if she hadn't done her community service project there? Probably not. But having that exposure and that experience showed her what a difference she can make in the world.
You're talking about a very transforming set of experiences. Can you imagine a real renaissance on the continent of Africa? Is that what you see ahead?
That's what I'm working desperately to enable. As I said, I have sort of been through despair over Africa, and it's a very dark place. And for the sake of my children and their children, I sincerely hope that there will be a renaissance. I think that, you know, if higher education across the continent is transformed, we will change the continent. I mean, can you imagine if universities in Africa competed on the basis of whose students are the most ethical, or whose students are the most creative, who are the best problem solvers? I mean, if we achieve that, we really would change the continent. And so this is what I am working very hard to do. We are now thinking very hard about, you know, how do we take this to scale? You know, the question is coming to us from outside. And we're thinking, how do we replicate? Are we replicating the idea? Are we replicating something else? How do we start a social movement? That is the question. Because if we can start a social movement, if we can sort of get some genetic material out of Ashesi and inject it everywhere, you know, that would be a very amazing change that would occur. And the question is, how do we do that? And how do we enable that?
And Mr. Ali, by virtue of changing the level of access, by virtue of making education much more accessible to girls and women, and much more accessible to those who are at the bottom of the pyramid, do you see a potential renaissance in
Yeah,
Pakistan?
I'm an optimist, I have to be. you know, we have a very open door policy. I mean, there are schools and colleges and even universities sprouting all over the country who come to us to get ideas, to borrow our syllabi. Our librarian goes around the country and sort of institutes systems that we have in our library so that everybody can come up to our level. So we want to share anything that anybody wants to borrow from us except money. We are very generous with that. We give them our cases to be taught in their business schools. We bring their teachers and upgrade their skills so that they can teach the same way that our teachers are. So that's the one way that we can spread the message and hope everybody will come up to our standard.
What's interesting to bear in mind about these two philanthropists is that they are engaged philanthropists. They're involved in these universities personally. So it's not just a grant or a series of grants. It's also all their intellectual capital and their personal engagement, which is so striking. You know, tomorrow we're going to have a whole session on metrics and how you measure outcomes. Patrick, at what point did you realize you were on the right course?
Well, I would say that I realized we were on the right course just 3 weeks after we started classes. I say that because, you know, 3 weeks in, I log on to my computer and I, you know, open Outlook and there's this message from a student, just 3 weeks. And he had written it in such large font, it filled my screen. And the message said, "I am thinking now." And then he says, "Thank you." And I just thought, wow.
Well, I think these two men have left us with a good deal to think about and to talk about. So just as we come to a close, I wanted to remind you that thanks to the Hilton Foundation, we're going to have a wonderful reception tonight at 6. And I expect the place to be just buzzing with what we've just learned from Mr. Ali and from Mr. Awuah, from Patrick. I'm sorry, I'm used to calling you Patrick. So, but please join me in thanking them for the work they do and for sharing it with us.
Thank you.